What are Epic Gamer Kinich and Malding Yaparahao's biggest pros and cons? That's what I'm here to tell you today. My name is Juice, and let's get into it. For starters, the main noteworthy thing about this character, or I suppose this pair of characters, is that this duo is absolutely excellent against boss encounters. Kinich's kit was primarily designed to be really good against single target enemies, considering that he locks onto one at a time and then nukes them down. It's his specialty, and boy does he perform his specialty very, very well. I would like to add, that is not to say that his nukes can only hit one enemy at a time. You're able to blast down multiple enemies at once if you're able to hit them all. It just takes a little bit of positioning. However, he is undeniably at his absolute best whenever he's facing boss encounters. And when you consider how single target centric the current Abyss climate is, he absolutely thrives in the current meta. So if you're somebody that's in need of a very powerful single target damage dealer, then look no further than Kinich and Hao. Kinich is also a pretty good pickup to make if you're somebody that's interested in collecting a good DPS of every element, as Kinich is easily the best Dendro DPS. I mean, granted, he doesn't exactly have a lot of competition in that regard, but I'd say that makes him stand out even further. He's the only Dendro DPS that really matches up to today's modern standards. That's not to say that the other good Dendro DPSs are bad, it's more so to say that Kinich is just a cut above the rest. Kinich also ends up being a very unique Dendro DPS, because he doesn't rely on spread or hyperbloom. He synergizes well with burning. The only other Dendro unit that really cares about that is Emilie, making those two very unique Dendro characters in my opinion. So all around, you get a pretty good package when it comes to what he brings to the Dendro element. I'd also like to take a moment to talk about how good his range is. You see, if you're fighting a flying enemy like the Aeon Blight Drake, then Kinich is actually able to latch onto the enemy and spin around them while they're in the air. His cannon blasts are also still going to reach the enemy. The reason as to why I find this convenient is that instead of having to adapt your team and bring a bow user so that you can shoot down the enemy, you can take your usual Kinich team along and it'll get the job done just fine. Something else that I'd like to mention in regards to Kinich's grapple is that if you're fighting something like the secret source device that summons those two pillars, you're able to use his grapple to go and reach those pillars, instead of having to climb up them. It just goes to show how versatile his grapple is on the whole. Listen, take it from somebody who's played a whole lot of Kinich. I find his movement flexibility to be very, very convenient. I also find that his high Primogem-based investment isn't bad at all. His C1 increases the damage output of his main source of damage by a really significant margin, and as for his C2, whenever you consider that the only real source of consistent Dendro Red Shred that we have in this game is 4-piece Deepwood Memories, 30% Dendro Red Shred is a strong buff to have around. This isn't even mentioning how his high Primogem-based investment is really solid for his team as well. Moeka is busted, we are all aware of this fact. So getting constellations for the honorary son of Caledon is just never a bad idea. And as for Emilie, even just getting her signature weapon is a really solid increase to her own damage output. All in all, there's a lot that you can do for his teams in terms of high Primogem-based investment. I'd also like to say that I personally believe that Kinich is the most exploration-friendly character that is released out of all of the Natlan characters. That might sound strange to you at first. After all, Moeka, she can fly, swim, and drive across the floor very, very fast. Chaska, she can literally fly. But here's the kicker. Those abilities are only really effective within Natlan's borders. Kinich's grapple, even though you can't do the double effect outside of Natlan, I still find it to be a very useful travel ability even outside of the region. A grapple in general is still a very handy thing to have. Kinich's grapple has integrated its way into my daily gameplay routine no matter what region I'm in. Of course, it's very, very nice for traversing Natlan as well, especially when you consider that it doesn't really take up that much Night Soul. As while there are Night Soul totems placed basically everywhere inside of Natlan, I find that you barely ever have to really refill with Kinich. He just doesn't take that much. And it's genuinely just such nice quality of life when I'm exploring there. So I really wanted to place a special emphasis on that. His grapple is filled with value. I'd also like to highlight how to an extent, Kinich is quite accessible. Now, keywords, to an extent. He is indeed free-to-play friendly, but there is a catch. However, we'll first run over the positive qualities here. First of all, you're very easily able to get him a free-to-play friendly craftable claymore. Both of them are good on him, and he'll perform quite solidly on these. Then for his teammates, you can stick him with Bennett, Eonson, Shangling, Pyro MC, you get the idea. You have quite a lot of 4-star teammate options, so if you're somebody that's only recently started out playing the game, then you have plenty of characters that you can choose to build your Kinich's team with. Now the 4th slot is where things start to get a little iffy, but you can very easily put somebody like Kali there with 4-piece Deepwood Memories in order to further support your Kinich's damage, or you could even put a generalist there like Fischl. So if you're somebody that's just starting out, or you're someone that just doesn't really have a lot to work with when it comes to Kinich teams, don't worry about it. You're not going to be strapped for options. And yes, of course, Moeka is indeed his best in slot when it comes to Pyro application, but you don't need her. He's going to get by just fine if you use Pyro MC, or even the Leeway Chef. And shoot, If you'd rather save your honorary Son of Caledon member for the second half in order to play her as a main DPS, then you're still able to use one of those substitute pyro options with him. However, we should probably address the Fontanian perfumer-shaped elephant in the room. That's right, Kinich is quite Emilie dependent. Now, don't get me wrong, he doesn't need her. You can still play him just fine without her, and you will still clear the Spiral Abyss. However, it is undeniable that she definitely does help him out a lot. You see, this is because she's very good at helping him maintain the burning state on enemies. This means that Kinich can stay in his skill state for longer, and that's thanks to his A1, because whenever enemies get afflicted with burning or burgeon damage, he restores 7 Night Soul points every 0.8 seconds. So if you have Emilie in your team, then you're very easily able to blast out 4 Kinich cannon shots per rotation. If you're good at the game, then you're able to blast out 5. However, that does take a little bit more practice. If you're not using Emilie, or you're using some kind of substitute, then it's more likely that you're going to get in the range of 3 to 4 as opposed to 4 to 5. And having an extra large Kinich nuke per rotation? Yeah, that is quite the upgrade to your team's overall damage output. However, if I was to attribute Emilie's entire purpose within these teams to just fueling his A1, goodness me would that be underselling her, because she herself does really good personal damage. Especially if you have her signature weapon, she actually contributes quite a lot to the team's overall damage output, thus making the team feel more complete. So if you want to play Kinich at his absolute best, then you're gonna want to pull for Emilie down the line. Keep that in mind. Now, like I said, you don't require Emilie. He's still a good DPS independent of her. But it is undeniable that she is the final missing piece of the puzzle for him. I would say that for Kinich mains that really want to optimize their Kinich in particular, you'd rather prioritize pulling for Emilie over Moika. I'm not saying she's a better unit than Moika. Obviously, the Exalted Pyro Archon is a much better character on the whole. Nobody is contesting that. However, if you're a super hyper dedicated Kinich main, then you really want to get Emilie. I'm just trying to really drive home the point here. Obviously, in an ideal world, you would have both, but I would say that Kinich's substitutes for his Pyro Applicant teammate are a lot better than his substitutes for whoever his final slot teammate is. Emilie just offers so much to Kinich in particular that no other character can really match her value there. Otherwise, Kinich struggles in heavy AoE without any help. Now I would like to highlight, without any help, because there are some situations in which you can make him work in AoE, namely if you have Venti and it's a mobbing scenario. I like shilling this scene whenever I get the chance, because I personally find the synergy to be really cool, and it uses 2 characters that I am very fond of. So, if you're in a mobbing situation and you're able to use Venti, apply some pyro on the enemy, use Venti's burst, and then burn away with Kinich. You're able to constantly apply Dendro to all the trash mobs and get burning up consistently, while being able to nuke down all enemies that have been pulled up by the suck radius at once. And also, thanks to his amazing grapple range which we discussed earlier, he's easily able to reach the enemies within Venti's pull radius, so that also poses no issue to him whatsoever. So in those instances, you're actually going to be fine in heavy AoE. However, if you don't have Venti, then yeah, ideally you wouldn't use Kinich in heavy AoE scenarios. He was mostly designed for single target. I think he's fine in 2 to 3 target scenarios, as you're still able to position yourself well enough to the point where you're able to nuke down all the enemies at once. I find that for the current structure of the Spiral Abyss and how enemies are currently laid out, he does very well. But if you ever find yourself in an encounter where you're fighting a lot of enemies at once, and they're all very spread out, Kinich is not really going to be the best option there, unless you have Venti. I would actually like to point out, that is an interesting instance in which you would rather use Venti over Emilie. But it's a very niche circumstance, so I wouldn't get Venti over just that. However, Venti is literally a peak femboy, so you should be pulling for him anyway. So for a majority of people, he's just not really going to be all that great in AoE. Now granted, I just don't really think that's that big of a deal. The hardest content in the game is all boss-centric, and for Imaginarium Theater, that game mode is just not that hard. You can very easily borrow somebody else's character, and you'll have more than enough more accessible AoE options at your disposal in order to take care of all the trash mobs. Honestly, I think Kinich is one of the coolest characters in all of Genshin Impact. I cannot state enough how much I love this character. I'm a C6 Lady Farina main. She is my #1 main. However, Kinich is absolutely my #2. I play him basically any chance I get, and in my overworld team, he is always sitting very comfortably alongside my Lady Farina. He looks cool, Ahau is hilarious, and I just love his playstyle. It is so much fun. I will say, you should trial him before you decide to pull for him, even if you do like him, because the spinning around playstyle isn't for everyone when you consider how much he moves the camera around. But if you're fine with that, then it feels very fast-paced and very fun. Honestly, one of the most fun characters that I've ever had the pleasure of playing within Genshin Impact. Honestly, I just recommend him on the basis of him being absolutely awesome and the fact that he's one of my top 5 favorite Genshin characters of all time, but the fact that he's a really solid unit too just makes me even happier. I will say, there's no particular reason to get him in specific over somebody like Mualani, who's also a very good single target Natlan DPS, but I'd say that the Pixel Enjoyer along with his Pixel Lad are unique enough in order to set themselves apart. If you want the best Dendro DPS that's available right now, then he is 100% a good pickup. Definitely not a must pull by any means, but he will 1000% get the job done for you very well. How about yourself? What do you think of my goats, Kinich and how? Let me know down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. As always, I have a ZZZ second channel. Head on over and subscribe if you're interested in some fun, silly ZZZ content. I'd also like to mention that I stream on Twitch. I stream once a week, every week on Saturdays, start from free PMK time. Come along so we can play Wuthering Waves, ZZZ, and do some other fun stuff together. Hopefully this video is able to tell you Kinich and how's biggest pros and cons. This has been Juice, signing out, and dude, he is literally the coolest Genshin Impact character. You don't believe me? Well then look at these cool sunglasses as proof.